Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be tackling a pretty complex topic.
Yeah.
So get ready to dive deep into the world of portosystemic shunts in cats.
Specifically, what can happen after surgery to correct them?
Right, because you might think, okay, surgery fixed the problem.
End of story.
But that's not always the case.
Sadly, no.
So we're looking at a meta-analysis today that's going to help us unpack what can go wrong.
Neurologically speaking.
Exactly. Neurological complications after portosystemic shunt surgery in cats.
It's more common than you'd think.
And it could be pretty scary for both cats and their owners.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's start with the basics for anyone who might not be familiar with portosystemic shunts.
Basically, a shunt is like an abnormal vessel.
A blood vessel.
Right, a blood vessel that allows blood to bypass the liver.
And why is that a problem?
Well, the liver is like a giant filter for the body.
It cleans the blood.
Exactly. It removes toxins and waste products.
So if the blood is bypassing the liver,
Those toxins aren't being filtered out.
and that can't be good.
Definitely not good. It can lead to all sorts of problems.
Okay, so that's why surgery is often needed to correct the shunt.
Right, to redirect the blood flow back through the liver.
Makes sense. But here's where things get tricky.
Even after a successful surgery,
Some cats can develop neurological problems.
we call these post-attenuation neurological signs, or PAS.
The PANS, got it. And there's also post-attenuation seizures, or PAS.
Right, so PANS and PAS.
Those are a mouthful. But what do these complications actually look like?
Well, PANS can manifest in a variety of ways.
Like what kinds of things might an owner notice?
It could be something subtle, like just seeming a bit off or disoriented.
Okay, so maybe not their usual selves.
Right, or it could be more severe, like blindness.
Blindness, wow.
Yeah, or tremors, or even trouble walking.
And PAS, of course, involves seizures.
Exactly.
Or pretty serious stuff.
Yeah.
And I was surprised to learn just how common these complications are.
Yeah, the meta-analysis we're looking at found that almost 39% of cats develop PANS after surgery.
Oh, almost 40%. That's a lot higher than I would guessed.
And about 20% develop PAS.
So a significant portion of cats are at risk.
Which is why it's so important to understand these complications.
Absolutely. So let's dive into the potential causes.
The tricky part is we don't know for sure what causes PANS.
Really? It's still a mystery.
There are a few theories.
Okay, we'll lay them on us.
One theory is that it's related to changes in the central nervous system's metabolism.
Metabolism meaning how the body uses energy.
Right, and specifically, it might involve elevated levels of certain substances that could contribute to seizures.
Interesting. Another theory.
High ammonia levels in the blood.
Ammonia, that's toxic, right?
It can be if it builds up.
And that ties back to the liver not filtering properly.
Exactly. If the liver isn't functioning at 100% after surgery, ammonia can accumulate.
Makes sense. What else are the researchers considering?
Electrolyte imbalances have also been proposed as a potential cause.
Electrolytes like sodium and potassium.
Right. And it's not necessarily about having abnormal levels.
But rather fluctuations in those levels.
Exactly. Those fluctuations might be enough to trigger neurological problems.
Okay, fluctuations, interesting. Are there any other theories we should know about?
There's also the theory of portal hypertension,
Which is?
high blood pressure in the vein that carries blood to the liver.
Okay, but has that been proven in cats?
The research hasn't really supported that theory so far.
So maybe not the most likely culprit.
Right. And finally, infection has been largely ruled out as a cause.
Well, thank goodness for that. At least infection isn't a major concern.
Exactly.
But that still leaves us with a bunch of theories and no definitive answers.
Unfortunately, that's where we're at right now.
So at this point, I bet our listener is wondering, is there anything that makes a cat more likely to develop these complications?
That's a great question, and one that researchers are still trying to answer.
So we don't really know what the risk factors are.
There are some clues, but more research is needed.
Okay, well, let's talk about what we do know. You mentioned earlier that age might play a role.
Yeah, some studies suggest that cats older than 2 years might be more susceptible to PANS.
Okay, so age is something to consider. What about other factors like breed or gender?
Those haven't been shown to be strong predictors so far.
So any cat could potentially be at risk.
Based on what we know now, yes.
Okay, but you also mentioned something called osmolality.
Right, osmolality was actually a significant risk factor identified in the study.
Can you remind me what osmolality is again?
It's a measure of the concentration of particles in the blood.
And higher osmolality after surgery was linked to a higher risk of PANS.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's definitely something that should be monitoring.
Absolutely.
This is all so fascinating, but I'm sure our listeners wondering what can be done if their cat actually develops PANS after surgery.
That's the tough part. Right now, we don't have a cure.
Really? No cure at all?
Not yet, because we still don't fully understand the underlying cause.
So what can be done?
The focus is on managing the neurological symptoms.
So basically treating the symptoms, but not necessarily addressing the root cause.
Right.
And are there ways to prevent it from happening in the first place?
We'll delve into the specifics of treatment and prevention a bit later.
Okay, sounds good. But first, let's unpack some more details from this meta-analysis.
There's a lot more to uncover about how PANS can manifest and the factors that might influence outcomes.
It's complex stuff.
Yeah.
But understanding the nuances can help us all be better advocates for our feline friends.
I agree. You know, one thing that really struck me in this meta-analysis was the sheer amount of data they analyzed.
Yeah, they looked at 12 different studies, right?
12. That's a lot of cats and a lot of information to sift through.
And they were all high-quality studies, too, which is important.
Absolutely. It means we can be more confident in the findings.
So what kind of things did they uncover? We talked about the different theories for what might cause PANS.
Right. But this meta-analysis also looked at how those neurological problems actually manifest in cats.
Like what specific symptoms are we talking about?
Well, seizures are a big one.
As you'd expect with PAS.
Right. But even with PANS seizures can be a part of the picture.
So it's not always a clear-cut distinction between the two.
Sometimes it can be blurry.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
Seizures are common, but what else did they find?
A lot of cats also experience visual disturbances.
Like what?
Blindness, for example.
Wow, that's scary.
Yeah, it can be pretty alarming for both the cat and the owner.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I imagine it makes everyday life pretty difficult for the cat.
Definitely. It can affect their ability to navigate their surroundings and interact with their environment.
So vision problems, seizures, what other symptoms came up?
Some cats exhibited more subtle signs like changes in behavior.
Like what kinds of changes?
They might become more withdrawn or less active.
Or maybe more irritable?
Possibly. Or they might have changes in appetite.
So not eating as much, or maybe eating more than usual.
Exactly. It can vary from cat to cat.
It sounds like PANS can be a bit of a chameleon.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah.
It can present in so many different ways, which can make it challenging to diagnose.
And I imagine that makes it even harder to study and understand.
Absolutely. It adds another layer of complexity to the whole picture.
So we've got this wide range of symptoms and no clear-cut cause.
It's a puzzle, for sure.
But this meta-analysis did shed some light on when these symptoms tend to appear.
Right. They found that most cases of PANS develop within the first 96 hours after surgery.
So within 4 days.
Exactly.
And the median onset time was around 24 hours after recovery from anesthesia.
That's right. So that initial period after surgery is really crucial.
Vets and owners need to be extra vigilant during that time.
Absolutely. Watching for any signs of neurological problems.
But does that mean if a cat makes it past those first few days, they're in the clear?
Not necessarily. While most cases do emerge early on, some cats can develop PANS later.
Oh, wow. So even if a cat seems fine initially, they could still be at risk.
It's possible. So owners should definitely keep an eye out for any unusual signs in those first few weeks after surgery.
So vigilance is key. But what about the duration of these symptoms? How long can they last?
That's a tough question to answer because it can vary so much.
So some cats might recover quickly, while others might have lingering problems.
Exactly. Some cats might experience mild symptoms that resolve within a few days.
Okay, that's good news.
But others might have more persistent issues that last for weeks, months, or even longer.
Wow, so it really is a spectrum.
It is. And the outcome is likely influenced by a number of factors.
Like the severity of the initial symptoms.
Right. And the cat's overall health, how well they respond to treatment.
It sounds like there's still a lot we don't know about PANS.
There is, but that's why research like this meta-analysis is so important.
It helps us get a clearer picture of the problem and identify areas where we need more information.
Exactly. And hopefully it will lead to better treatment strategies and maybe even ways to prevent PANS altogether.
That's the ultimate goal, right?
Absolutely. To spare cats and their owners from going through this ordeal.
Well said. So for now, it seems like the best we can do is arm ourselves with knowledge, be vigilant observers of our feline friends, and work closely with our veterinarians.
I agree. That's the most empowering thing we can do.
It's pretty incredible when you think about it, all the things we still don't know about PANS and cats.
Absolutely. It's a condition that definitely keeps us on our toes.
But at least this meta-analysis gives us some valuable insights.
Definitely. And one thing I found particularly interesting was the discussion of different surgical techniques.
Oh, right. You mentioned that earlier. there are different ways to actually correct a portosystemic shunt.
Right. We talked about complete ligation where the shunt is completely closed off.
But there are other options too.
Exactly. There's partial ligation where only a portion of the shunt is closed.
Okay, so that allows some blood to still bypass the liver.
Right. The idea is to gradually reduce the shunt's impact rather than shutting it down all at once.
And then there are those amyloid constrictors.
Ah, yes. Those are pretty cool, actually.
How so?
Well, they're these little devices that are implanted around the shunt.
And what do they do?
They're made of a special material that slowly swells over time.
So they gradually constrict the shunt.
Exactly. It's a very gradual process.
So both partial ligation and amyloid constrictors are more gradual approaches compared to complete ligation.
Right. And that might be significant when it comes to PANS.
How so?
Well, the study noted that complete ligation had the highest overall prevalence of PANS and PAS.
Okay, so that sudden closure of the shunt might be a factor.
Possibly. But here's the thing.
That's that.
There wasn't enough data in the meta-analysis to draw firm conclusions about the other techniques.
So we don't know for sure if they're associated with a lower risk of PANS.
Some studies suggested they might be, but more research is needed.
It's always more research,
That's
isn't
the
it?
nature of science. Always more to learn.
But it makes me wonder if maybe there's an optimal surgical approach for minimizing the risk of PANS.
Or if it really depends on the individual cat and their specific situation.
So many factors to consider.
It's a complex equation for sure.
But that's what makes veterinary medicine so fascinating, right?
It's like a never-ending puzzle.
And even though we don't have all the pieces yet, this deep dive has given us a much better understanding of PANS.
It's helped us connect some of the dots.
And hopefully it'll empower vets and cat owners to make more informed decisions.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to our furry companions.
So if there's one message you want our listeners to take away from this episode, what would it be?
Be informed. Be observant. And be proactive. If your cat is having surgery to correct a portosystemic shunt, talk to your vet about the potential risks of PANS.
And pay close attention to your cat's behavior after surgery, right?
Exactly. Early detection is key.
Because even though PANS can be a serious complication, it's not always a worst-case scenario.
Right. Many cats do recover and go on to live happy, healthy lives.
There's always hope, and that's what's important.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today in our deep dive into PANS in cats. We've explored the potential causes, the risk factors, the treatment options, and the prognosis.
And we've emphasized the importance of ongoing research and open communication between vets and owners.
And, of course, the unwavering bond between humans and animals.
It's what makes it all worthwhile.
From Vet Neurojar, keep those minds-inspired hearts light and tails wagging.